Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
And we'd like to welcome everybody back to the Footballers Family Podcast. And I got a special guest. I got his book right here. And this is on radio, or this is on audio, so you can't see it, but I'm holding his book up on the screen here. Would you like to introduce yourself and talk about your book?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. My name's John Talty. In my day job, I'm a national college sports reporter for CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports, primarily focusing on college football. But, we're here to talk about this book that just came out on Tuesday. It's called The Price, What It Takes to Win in College Football's Era of Chaos. And it's really a deep dive into what it's like within college football right now. We tried to focus on, key figures at every level, whether that's, big name coaches like Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh, whether it's the NCAA president and how he's trying to prop up this organization that feels like it's going through an existential crisis, to what it's like to be a five-star quarterback when you're getting offered seven-figure deals and trying to navigate, where to go to college when you're 17, 18 years old, something that, only really this current generation, the last couple of years has even had to deal with. So, we feel like college football has gone through just tremendous amount of change in the last 3-4 years. And it was ripe for a deep dive into how we got to this moment, where it's headed, and what it's truly like from a human impact, a human toll for these coaches and players and others who, love college sports, but are facing, a lot of different challenging situations right now.
Well, John, I'll tell you this. I'm more of a pro guy. I respect and love college football, but I grew up a Vanderbilt Commodore fan where I live. So that explains a lot, doesn't it?
It's tough to be a Vanderbilt fan in the SEC. You're not usually going to be at the top of the heap.
No. I'm going, let's see, not this Saturday, but the next Saturday, my daughter is going to be a cheerleader up there. So I'm going to actually go to a Vanderbilt game, but for her. But anyway, my knowledge of college football is very limited compared to yours. I actually remember reading some of the things that you did on 24/7 Sports and CBS. I know exactly who you are now. It just dawned on me. And I'm glad that you're on this. This is pretty cool to me. I'm nerding out just a little bit, to be honest.
Let's do it.
But what I understand about college football is today, Nick Saban, I believe he mentioned it, that he got out of coaching because of the NIL stuff, or part of it. And it seems like it's kind of hard. We're recruiting where Vanderbilt can't offer you seven figures, but Texas could. And it comes down to what money can you have to pay a recruit. And I've read stories about people who rather play in college and go to the pros because they'll make more money in college.
There is more money to be made at times, and, perfect example. We write about this in our book. Tua Tagovailoa's little brother, Talia, played at Maryland last year. And, he ended up, making, six figures, high six figures. But he had an offer, as he claims at least, that would have paid him $1.5 million to play for 1 year as a quarterback. Now he is, in the CFL, and I don't know all the salary details, but I'm pretty positive that that's a lot more than he would have made, in the CFL, or will make in the CFL. So you are seeing more guys, both college basketball and college football, maybe staying for an extra year, because in the short term, they can make more than maybe if they're drafted in the third or fourth round, whether it comes to football. So that's an interesting factor. The point you make about Vanderbilt and Texas, like in theory, Vanderbilt could spend that money, if you get a big enough booster who wants to invest major money. That's, one of the exciting things, if you look at it from a positive side, I guess, is that, if I went to Maryland, if I was a billionaire, in theory, I could give Maryland $20 million right now and say, just go buy football players. And that's something that's unique in this current era. But, what I think is interesting is that as college goes through its current, upheaval, is, and just kind of like professionally too, especially in baseball where there's not a salary cap and we don't have one in college either. Spending the most money doesn't guarantee the most success. And there are quite a few colleges, Miami and Texas A&M being, two of the biggest ones, who spent a lot of money right out of the gate. They were very excited to be aggressive and lock up talent. And it had problems. It created corrosive issues within their locker room where, guys were making, say a freshman was coming in, making a lot of money, and maybe there was a senior who was a starter who wasn't making as much money. And that led to locker room issues. So it's opened up all these other problems that, the NFL has to deal with to some extent. It's a little bit different because everybody knows it's a professional sport. College is kind of going through growing pains with it right now. And it's why a lot of coaches do want a salary cap. So it's like, give us the same rules as the NFL. Give me, hey, everybody in the SEC can spend $15 million on their roster. And if I'm Vanderbilt's coach, let me go out and I will evaluate better and I'll develop better and I'll find some sort of edge that it's not purely just a, financial arms race. But right now it is. And so some schools are leveling up, and other schools who don't have those heavy, big time boosters are struggling. And that's a tough spot for them to be in.
Well, if I remember correctly, Sam Bradford, Jamarcus Russell, you go back to the 60s with Joe Namath, they get a rookie deal. Joe Namath, I think, made $400,000 or something like that for his contract. Jamarcus Russell, Sam Bradford made incredible amount of money as a rookie. And you had guys on their second contract who were making nowhere near that. So I couldn't imagine what it would be like being a senior who this just started and you're making, oh golly, it's how sad is this, $100,000 a year. And you get this freshman guy in here who's part 4 or 5 star that pulls down not only $1 million from the school, but also through, people selling him merchandise and have him the face of their franchise. I can't imagine how that would be.
Yeah, it was a real challenge. And I think, like anything in life, things, they level out over time, right? We get more data, we learn from our mistakes. And, I think over the last couple of years, we're seeing, more guys get rewarded. But part of that, and we saw this, it happened to Nick Saban, and it was a deep frustration for him. And it's happened to a lot of other coaches too, where guys will come to your office and say, if you don't give me X, I'm leaving. And they're able to do that because they're not under contract. And in part because a lot of this is still kind of legal, kind of not. You're not technically allowed to pay for play, even though everyone is. So it's a murky ground for everyone, which has given players tremendous leverage and power. And I think a lot of people would say it's long deserved. They haven't been paid up until the last couple of years, at least legally. But it's created real challenges where, I think Lane Kiffin has made this point a couple of times. Imagine if in the middle of the stretch run for the NFL where the playoffs are starting, you had free agency happening at the same time. That's what happens in college football right now. When the transfer portal opens up in December and January, as teams are competing to win a national championship, they're potentially at risk to lose some of their top players. Now, you would hope if you're competing for the playoff, those guys will stay, but they don't have to, and you can lose depth players. And so right now, college football, and they're trying to change this rule currently, but as of right now, there's 2 free agency periods, one of them during the most important part of the season. And that is why, again, I think coaches are very frustrated right now. They just want, give us some rules that we can really work with, and don't just let it be an unregulated, mess, which is kind of where it's at right now.
The NCAA seems to be a paper tiger, really, in that sense. But if the SEC made those rules, does that mean that, well, the Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore? Well, it does. It has 2 teams, doesn't it? But does that mean the ACC has to abide by those rules?
No, and that's what makes, college so unique too, is that there's all these little fiefdoms that like to do things their own way. And even, right now, with NIL, there are different states that have different laws. And so even in, say, the SEC, right now, for instance, in the state of Alabama, high school players cannot start making money through NIL. In other states, like in Missouri, they can. So, right now, Missouri is playing under different rules than Alabama based on their state laws, and they're in the same conference. And that's why, there's been this desire for a federal solution for a while now. It hasn't happened. These colleges and conferences have spent a lot of money lobbying in DC. It hasn't led to a passed bill yet. Who knows if there ever will be? But that, I think, is inherently one of the challenges right now. And, if the NCAA, kind of anytime they do anything, they're going to get sued. Anytime they're kind of turning the corner, someone's going to sue them no matter what they do. And so they've kind of been frozen in some ways in fear because they're just like, well, we do this, we're going to get sued. And so you've seen them essentially throw their hands up and say, all right, we can't really do much right now. And they're trying to find solutions. And I think they're hoping that, with the passing of the House settlement that, they'll get maybe some more power back. But as it stands right now, it's kind of a free for all. What coaches described to me, analogy that I got over and over again, it's like there's a ton of people driving 90 and 100 miles per hour on the speedway, and there's not a single cop to stop anybody. And that's kind of dangerous for everybody involved.
The big thing I say that everybody here can agree on is the most positive thing that happened with this NIL is that NCAA college football is back on the PlayStation and the Xbox. Can we get an amen to that?
Yeah. I mean, and that's where, think about it, that's kind of how we got to this moment, right? You
Ed
think
O'Bannon.
back to Ed O'Bannon. Yeah. And, we detail one of the chapters in our book is about Ed O'Bannon and Sonny Vaccaro, a longtime sneaker guy who, helped kind of facilitate Ed O'Bannon being the face of that lawsuit. But yeah, I mean, was a game that I know that I missed. I haven't gotten a chance to play it since the new one came out, but I have a lot of friends who have, and people love it and are having a great time with it. And I think it shows, how much passion and interest there is in college football. To get, it seems like from what I've seen, the sales numbers for that game have been pretty high.
It's been okay. It's been okay. Let me tell you this, John, that my college I went to didn't have a football team, so we've been undefeated since 1869. I tell people we've never lost a game of football. But I picked Vanderbilt because you got to build a team up. You can't pick Alabama, Georgia. You have to pick a bad team. But I didn't raise the difficulty level, and I was beating Texas 100-0. I'm like, okay, maybe I need to raise the level up. Well, it didn't last very long, so I quit. I'm just telling you that there's some realistic parts on that game, and then there's other parts that are not. But anyway, back to it. Let's talk about your book, because I can get distracted here talking about NCAA football real fast. Man, it's been the last time I played that game before now, Johnny Manziel was on it, and that was a human cheat code. He was like, he was like Michael Vick back in 2001 Madden, human cheat code. So tell me a little bit about your book. Tell me more, because there's 21 chapters in this, and I'm seeing a lot of interesting. I haven't had a chance to read the book, like I said, but I'm seeing a lot of different titles here that are pretty. Tell me about Oppenheimer, chapter 3.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's what we were just kind of talking about. There's a kind of a good quote in there where Sonny Vaccaro says, I think I was Oppenheimer, which a little egotistical, but I think in some ways true, and it details. Again, I think a lot of how we got to this moment and a lot of the people behind the scenes who, helped pave, for better or worse, this current college football environment that we're in. And, one of the people that I spent a good amount of time with was former NCAA president Mark Emmert, and trying to understand, kind of why didn't the NCAA evolve? Why didn't they, do more to try to stave off what a lot of us thought was inevitable? And that kind of refusal to seemingly led to even more problems. And, of course, he's going to give his perspective that, is going to maybe in some ways reflect positively on his time there. But he just talked to me about just how challenging it was. The exact term he used said that it was like a knife fight trying to get anything done. And that's because, again, I think college sports is so unique in the grand scheme of things, and that there's really nothing like it anywhere else in the world. You go to Europe. I was in Spain this a few months ago, and I was like trying to explain to them what college football is, and they just didn't get it. They're like, wait, like university kids play football? Like, who cares? I was like, well, 100,000 people go to those games, and they're like, oh, okay, we get it now. But they just didn't get it because it's not a thing in Europe in that way. And unlike the NFL, which has 32 owners, or the NBA, like there's thousands of stakeholders. You've got all these university presidents who don't really know much about college sports having a big say in college sports. And so it has inherent challenges that other professional sports don't have. But on the flip side, there were a lot of opportunities to create a system that would be better served than where we're at right now. And instead, the NCAA, for the reasons that it did, fought against these things left and right. And for a while, they won. They won a lot of lawsuits. They were able to hold off all these things. But eventually, with Ed O'Bannon, that turned. And since then, they have seemingly lost every lawsuit that they're involved in. And that's, again, as I said earlier, I think why they're afraid to do anything, because they just know they're in a current environment in which it is not going to be favorable for them to go to court, which is why they've started spending big money on settlements. But there's still more lawsuits to come, and it just doesn't feel like the NCAA has much of a legal standing right now to win many of them, if any of them.
Okay, so I know you know this, and most of my listeners probably know this if they follow any type of college football. There are have-nots and have teams all over the place. Would you consider Maryland a have team or have not?
So what's great about Maryland, and I think one of my favorite chapters in the book, is I think they're exactly in the middle. And that is such an interesting place to be in this current college football world. And, I spent a lot of time with their football coach, and he used this analogy, which, I'd never ever thought of college football in this way. And it's kind of funny, but it made me think. And he explained to kind of like what it's like right now to be at Maryland. And he said, at the top of the level, your Alabamas, your Georgias, your Michigans, like that's Saks Fifth Avenue. That's the elite. They're able to get the top clients, all these different things. He said the level below us, like a school like Charlotte, that's like a Target, a little cheaper, attracts a little bit of a different client, very popular. There's reasons to go there. And he said, we're kind of Macy's. We're stuck in the middle. We're going to lose some of our top players to Alabama and Georgia if they want them, because it's a bigger school and they have more money. And we're going to lose some of our maybe our backup players to a Charlotte, because they can offer them starting spots and bigger opportunities. So we're getting eaten from both ends right now. And, he used a bit of a profane, quote, which I can't say in full, but essentially it's like, that's why you don't really see Macy's anymore, because it's tough to be in the middle. And so those Marylands, Rutgers, Indianas, Mississippi States, those schools that they've got some pedigree, but they're not the top dogs and they're not the little dogs. They're in a really tough spot because you're trying to spend to keep up with the top dogs, but you don't have the tradition or the natural advantages that they have. And, as Loxley told me, it's like, we either got to decide whether we want to try to level up, or maybe we need to think about leveling down, but it's just tough to survive in that middle spot. And so one of the reasons why we wanted to feature Maryland in this book, and it's part because, I have a lot of familiarity with the school as a graduate, but I think it's not just about the top dogs, right? Alabama's fascinating and we write about them, and Georgia and Texas A&M, but I think you need to know what it's like for somebody in the middle where they don't have the big NIL money and they're losing coaches and players to other places. Like, how does that guy survive? And so those are some of my favorite chapters in the book, because I think it just gives you a perspective that I think a lot of people probably haven't read yet so far.
I wonder how the smaller teams, the smaller, schools survive during these things. Answer that if you would. And also, I might have been incorrect on this, but I think I remember this recently, that Reggie Bush got his Heisman back because they said that that's how that works. Do you think that there's still people who are giving $100 handshakes now to people like that?
Yeah, I think that still happens. It doesn't have to happen that way, because there are legal ways of doing it. But, I've heard, I would call it, I guess anecdotally, that there are schools that still in part prefer to operate, excuse me, backtrack, not schools, boosters who would still prefer to operate underneath, the shadows underneath the table. It's a system that they know well, if they've been doing it in the past. And, there's some ways of doing that, getting somebody cash fast, maybe getting a parent or an uncle some cash. It can be a really effective way to help influence a person. So that's definitely still happening. Again, there's other ways you can do it now, which I think allows for more legitimate, hey, you're a car dealer in Austin, Texas, rather than giving a kid $100 handshake, why don't you just pay him to, do an advertisement for your dealership, and you can pay him legitimately. And so that's allowed for more of that. But yeah, it's to my knowledge, it's definitely still happening.
Well, okay, let me ask you, because this is ignorant. I'm completely ignorant on this, but if you tell me this, I will be learned. if somebody did that, they went to Austin, Texas, they went to University of Texas, and they said, we want you to do a car commercial for us. Does that money go directly to that person, or does it go into a pod, or does it go to whatever? What does it do?
It can either or, and that's kind of the uniqueness of the system right now, is that you can go direct. Some of these people are kind of paying into a pool, part of that's collectives. And there's different ways to do it. We explain this kind of stuff in the book because I do think it's a little confusing for people. But you have an option of, say, hey, I'll use Vanderbilt. I'm going to give $1 million to Vanderbilt's collective. Use that as you choose, right? I'll put it into general fund. You disperse it how you feel is necessary. That's one option. You can go direct, and a lot of kids now have agents or marketing reps or things like that, especially if they're prominent. So you can just go direct to their marketing agent and say, hey, I want to, Texas QB Quinn Ewers was just in a Dr. Pepper commercial. You go to him, I want him in a Dr. Pepper commercial. It's going to cost $300,000 hypothetically, and you just pay that money, direct to him. The other thing that's interesting, it's kind of a combo of the two, is that sometimes, right now, the transfer portal and recruiting, say a kid who's really good pops into the transfer portal that maybe they didn't know was going to be there. What you see at times is the collective might go to a booster that they know has a good amount of money and said, hey, so-and-so from Georgia is now available. We didn't know he was going to be, but he's available. We want him. Would you be willing to kick in $250,000 to help get us this kid? And that guy might say, okay, if you can get him, I will kick in $250 of whatever the total price might be. And so that's a very specific kind of one-to-one transaction as well. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Overall, NIL was intended to be a way for kids to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness, which was initially intended to be, again, more of that, hey, Johnny Manziel, you're a huge deal. We'd love to do an autograph signing with you because people want your autograph, and I will pay you $10,000 to sign these autographs. That's what it was supposed to be. It's evolved way past that. A lot of these guys, especially football players, don't have that much marketing value, to be perfectly honest. Certainly not relative to what they're getting paid. And it evolved into a way to just pay for play. That's where we're at. It's these guys, some of which might get seven-figure deal. I promise you, they're not worth seven figures in marketing value. Those guys might not even tweet that much. They might not even have an Instagram, but they're dang good football players, and that's why they're getting paid that, because they're valuable to the football program. But it's gotten skewed a lot past where it initially started. And I think that's another reason why people are frustrated. Like, hey, this is not what we intended this to be.
Okay, in this area here, and thank you for explaining that to me. In this area, I live in Middle Tennessee. We have Vanderbilt, which is the SEC school here, which it shouldn't be, but it is. We have Middle Tennessee State, which is a pretty good size institute school. We have TSU. My sister and my dad went to TSU. It's smaller. I think if I remember correctly, Eddie George was the coach there for a while. I don't know if he is right now. We have several different colleges around the area that are small. We have Austin P, which my parents went to there. That's in Clarksville, just down the road from here. They're not on the same level as a Vanderbilt on money, SEC. They're smaller. Some of them may not even have a football team. They have basketball. That may be all they can have. Like the college I went to has basketball and baseball and softball. That's it. How does a team like an MTSU, which is a good size 30, 40,000 students, but they're not SEC caliber, they're not ACC caliber, how do they compete?
I think it's recalibrating what your expectations are. I think you have to be realistic. Now, this is not to knock Middle Tennessee State in any way, but even before NIL, I don't think Middle Tennessee State should have reasonably been dreaming of winning a national championship, right? We've got a long track record of that being essentially impossible for a school of that stature in the modern era to be able to do that. But I think you have to come to grips with what you can reasonably do, what the expectations are, and what the priorities are. And I think what we're seeing right now are schools starting to figure that out a little bit. And you mentioned schools that might only have a basketball team. In some ways, they have an advantage, right? It's easier actually to raise a little bit of money for basketball because there's less players. And if you have one or two really impact players, you can have a huge impact. And so we saw a school like Villanova, which has had tremendous amount of success in general. They've prioritized basketball. UConn, which has won the last two national championships, they have a football team, but they have prioritized basketball, and they've had a lot of success doing that. So there's a way of focusing. All right, we're going to invest in football, but maybe our best chance to success is really investing in our college baseball team because there's maybe a market inefficiency there where we can corner the market a little bit. Because all these SEC schools are spending all their money on football. Maybe we can get some guys that might not have been able to get otherwise. That's part of it. And just the acceptance that, if you're at a Middle Tennessee State and you happen to find a guy who's great, you might lose him. And that sucks. And that's just kind of the reality is that the middle of the pack to smaller schools have in some ways become a feeding ground for the bigger schools, especially in the transfer portal. A guy might go to a Middle Tennessee State, have 2 great years. He's all conference. And then Georgia's like, I really need a wide receiver. The kid in Middle Tennessee State's pretty good. Why don't we try to scoop him up? And that's what you're seeing, a lot of poaching of those kind of schools, which is deeply frustrating for them. And I completely understand that. And, until we get more ground rules and guidelines, that's not going to change, unfortunately, for the smaller schools.
Well, you remember Moneyball? One of the statements in Moneyball that gets me is that the Oakland Athletics, they're going to be the Las Vegas Athletics. They basically said we're feeders for the Yankees. So I can see what you're saying on that with Middle, and we're not going after Middle Tennessee State. That is the closest school that I can think of in this area. They are good at what they do, but are they Georgia? Are they Alabama?
No,
they're not.
And and we write about in the book, it's cliche, but we write about some Moneyball stuff because I do think there's schools realize, okay, we got to do it differently, and I do think that leads to creative strategies and innovation. And you're seeing schools that are finding ways to do it without having the most money. And I think that's great. And I do think if you're able to accept, okay, this is maybe where we stand in the pecking order, but it doesn't mean that we always have to be there. Let's find ways to do things differently. That, I think leads to opportunity for different schools. And I do think, as part of this, really big period of change within college football, there are going to be some winners that maybe we don't think much about right now. There are going to be schools that are going to level up, whether it's because of the expansion of the playoff or because they find some creative new way to capitalize on this world. Like, I do think, I don't know who that school is going to be, but I do think somebody who we don't think of as a powerhouse right now is going to find a way to, be more competitive or maybe even win a national championship. The A's never did as much, attention and credit as Moneyball's gotten. They never found a way to win at all, but they were able to be in the playoffs for a long time. The Rays have done a great job of that in baseball as well. I think there could be a football version of that. Just you got to find a way to do things a little bit differently.
Winning 6 games or 7 games for some of those teams are that's the goal. To me, when growing up, it was 2008 before I got to see Vanderbilt go to a bowl game. And I had to ask off work that night to go sit at Nissan Stadium in the coldest weather I've ever been to watch Vanderbilt beat, who was it? I think it was Boston College. I think it was Matt Ryan at the time was the quarterback. Was it Boston College? It was. Here it is. Here it is. Let's see. It was, it was Boston College. The next one I saw was NC State. And that was Mike Glennon. He played at that time. But yeah, you wanted to see your team. Of course, I don't have any ties to them. It's just the team I grew up watching. And you want to see them do well. You want to see them go to a bowl game, even if it's even it's the Mayo Bowl. You want them to go somewhere and do something because the next 4 months, I mean, come on, John, you know this. The next 3 or 4 months are going to depend on how we react in life. It's going to dictate everything we do. Are we going to be mad on Sundays or Mondays? It's because of our sports team. Yeah, go football, right?
Yeah, and and that's why we love it, right? We care about it, and it's I grew up New York Jets fan, so I'm used to a lot more disappointment than joy on Sundays and Mondays.
Oh, come on, at least you
But
got a Super Bowl.
I mean, I don't know how old you think I am. I was a little bit before my lifetime,
No,
unfortunately.
I don't think you're that old, but I'm just saying that y'all have a Super Bowl. I have a 1 yard short. 1 yard short.
But I was alive for that one, so that's a painful one. But yeah, I mean, we're all kind of gluttons for punishment, but we keep coming back, and that's why football is so great. But I think that's you need to make sure that the game continues to evoke those feelings. I think the NFL knows exactly what it is, and it is the most popular sport in the world, and is really good at keeping people invested, throughout the entire year. It's 24/7, 365. I think college football is closing in on that. It's not quite to the level of the NFL, of course, but the passion is pretty high. And I think you just kind of you almost want to shake, college football and be like, just figure it out, because there's so much to like about it, and there's so much passion, there's so much fandom.
Do you think it's because there's so many teams?
Yeah, it's part of it. And again, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. There's just all these different fiefdoms, and there's all these different kind of people who have a say, that it makes it hard to just get on the same page, right? And the way that I think Roger Goodell and Adam Silver and others can kind of get people in line, even if you got some loose cannons like a Jerry Jones or whatever. He's kind of able to collectively get the owners in line. It's a lot harder to do that when you have so many more constituents the way that you do in NCAA. But yeah, I mean, it's easier to pay attention to 32 teams than 132 type teams. That's, I think, part of the inherent challenge. Now, there might be only 30 to 40 teams that people really, really care about at a major, passion level. But there's still a lot of teams, a lot of games. In some ways, that makes it, more fun that we have all of these games on, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There's a college football game on seemingly every day. But I do think that sometimes it kind of divides up maybe the passion that you would have for just maybe that CBS game or that Fox game or the Monday Night Football game.
I'm looking forward to it. I watched more college football last year than I had in a while. And CBS, in this area, 2:30, it's SEC. I don't know what it's like where you are. Is it SEC or is it your conference?
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, I'm in Alabama, so
you're in Alabama. Okay.
Yeah. So it's it's SEC and CBS, but here's a good example. Part of the change, the SEC is not on CBS anymore. So that you'll have this Saturday, you go to put on CBS at 2:30 or 3:30, depending on your time, and it's not going to be an SEC game, and that's going to be hard for people too. And that iconic music that we all love is not going to be for the SEC. As a CBS employee, I'm excited for their new relationship with the Big Ten. I think I'm legally obligated to say that. But there's a changing of the guard here, where the SEC is now all in with ESPN, and the Big Ten doing something that's really interesting, where they're trying to basically think you.
Sorry, my daughter scared me half to death. Keep going.
You're good. The Big Ten has this thing where they are going to have games on all day, where there's going to be an early Fox game that's really important. There's going to be a 2:30, 3:30 CBS game that's going to be really important, and there's going to be a primetime NBC game. So they've taken a different strategy of trying to get all these three major networks to push them, whereas the SEC has gone all in at ESPN. And so you might see that reflected in some of the way that those conferences get covered. But it's another change of the guard right now.
We've got just a few more minutes. Again, thank you for not laughing too hard as my daughter gave me a heart attack. What gets me is I have a certain app. I don't think I could say it on online. I have an app that allows me to watch CBS. My Titans games, they're on that app. I watch that. I'll watch it on my TV, not on my phone anymore, but on my TV. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to buy another app to watch my SEC teams. I just don't know if I'm going to do that. So you may be all in on one network, but doesn't mean that the fans are going to follow you along that way.
And that's, I think that's one of the other factors, that's happening right now. And, we could probably talk for an hour about all the TV impact on college sports and, how that's changed things with conference realignment and all those different things. But, yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. I'm sure there are going to be fans who are going to, again, wake up on Saturday and try to put on CBS and be very surprised that they're seeing Ohio State Akron instead of an SEC game. And it's going to take a moment for them to figure it out. And they're going to be wondering, where's that great SEC game? And it's going to take them a second to figure out, oh, it's on ESPN now, or it's on ABC now. And so we're all kind of going through an adjustment period until this season really fully kicks off.
That just hurts my head. I'm playing the music right now, and it's epic. It is about as epic as when I was growing up, hearing Hank Williams Jr. sing on my friend, a Monday Night Football theme. Yeah. All my buddy friends are coming over tonight. It's epic to me. It's kind of like the CBS, even CBS NFL has great music. Fox has great music. Okay, I'm going to have a moment of just solace and meditation so I can get past that. Before we end, number one, I enjoyed this. You are not only you're an awesome writer, like I said, I remember reading your stuff and hearing your stuff, but also you're an awesome guy just to talk to. And I do appreciate you coming on this program, Mr. John. Now, tell us about your book and where they can find it, and I'll make sure I put it in the show notes.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, you can buy this book anywhere you buy books. A lot of people think Amazon is easiest. You can probably order it now and get it in your house the next day or two. But Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, which is huge in the South, as you know, and then just your independent bookstores. I'm sure they have it, and if they don't, go in and ask them, and they'll order it for you. Whatever is most convenient for you, we fully support. But again, the book is called The Price. It's by John Talty and my co-author, Armin Katayan. I think if you've been in any way interested in kind of what's going on in college football, what's it like, why did Nick Saban leave college football, what happened to Jim Harbaugh and the sign stealing scandal, all those big topics, this is the book that I think is for you. And I think if you love college football, you're going to love this book.
Thank you for coming on, and we'd love you to come back on later on if you're able to.
Would love to.
All right. Thank you. And thank y'all for listening to the Football's Family Podcast.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude. And I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.